Wall Street to Main Street to help small business owners have the same capital as corporate America and give them the same resources as a larger company. We cover business funding, business credit, scaling, business consulting, and much more. Check out the website at shieldadvisorygroup.com. Welcome to the show, The Liquid Lunch Project.
Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Liquid Lunch Project. I am Matthew R. Meehan, alongside my partner, the Professor Luigi Rosabianco. What's going on today, Lou? What do we got on tap?
Matt, I'm still getting over the trip to the grocery store this morning. I know you're not very domesticated and your wife handles the groceries and all the domestic technical parts of your life, but going to the grocery store lately, there is no doubt that we're going through some critical inflation.
We don't go to the grocery store. We got an app for that now. So,
well, the reason we mention inflation is because we have just the person to teach us how to use inflation to our advantage. Mr. Bronson Hill, founder and president of Bronson Equity. Bronson, welcome to the Liquid Lunch Project.
Hey, Lou, Matthew, really excited to be here. I'm excited for some liquid lunch today. I think it's going to be awesome. So we're looking forward to talking about it.
You can imagine you've got our attention. How do we use inflation to our advantage, my friend?
Yeah, so inflation, as you mentioned, going to the store, it can be a shocking experience that the things that cost, just 6 months ago cost less. Now they're 25% more in some cases. And so inflation is hitting us at the pump. It's hitting us in different costs all across the board. And so the biggest thing is the poor and the middle class usually don't own assets or don't own as many assets. But the more assets that you can own, now, Robert Kiyosaki, who wrote the book Rich Dad, Poor Dad, he says that an asset is something that puts money in your pocket every month, and a liability is something that takes money out of your pocket. So basically owning real estate that produces income that puts money in your pocket is an asset. A house you live in is actually surprisingly not actually an asset because it actually takes money out of your pocket every month. So how you really use inflation to your advantage is you buy assets if you can buy them using debt. Even though interest rates have risen a little bit to 5 or 6% or whatever it is, it's still significantly below the 9.1 official rate, or maybe the unofficial 15 to 17%. So over time, you pay off these debts for these income-producing properties or income-producing assets with money that is worth less, and the asset is worth more because you're paying off in future dollars. So it's pretty neat.
So how did you get started in real estate?
So I've always been interested in real estate. I've been doing single family for many years. And I think like a lot of people, I thought, hey, I'm going to do single family. I'm going to become financially free. And I had a great job. I was doing medical device sales. So I was working with physicians for about 10 years, going to surgery and sell them different products, heart surgical products. But I realized I was having to work really hard to make money, and I wanted to get to where I actually could achieve passive income. And Warren Buffett has this quote. I love Warren Buffett's quotes in general. He's a great quote, but he said, unless you learn how to make money while you sleep, you'll work until you die. So just the idea of truly having passive income that makes money for you while you sleep, real estate is a way to do it. So I thought I'm going to do this through single family. So I basically wanted to get 30 single family houses. I got to about 5, and I just realized it was a lot of work, and I wasn't really getting a lot of cash flow. So basically what I realized is that as I could scale, I learned about something called syndication, which is where I could raise money. I had a mentor that appeared and said, hey, you can actually raise the money and you can basically grow your wealth outside of it. So it allowed me to basically 20x my net worth, and in the last 4 years, be a part of 200 million in different real estate assets. So it's been a real dream to be doing this.
So can you explain to the audience, me and Luigi are definitely familiar in it. We've syndicated in a lot of real estate deals, but how does syndication actually work?
So syndication, I'd heard first for this term, maybe it was 6, 7 years ago, and I didn't know what it meant. What does that even mean? But what it means, basically, it's a legal structure that is used to set up an investment. So let's just say it's an apartment building. We buy apartment buildings, we can syndicate it, which means we basically buy an apartment building with this company that is a syndication. Some people are general partners. So my team and I, we actually manage the deal. We raise the money for the deal. We do diligence, we research, we do all that stuff. And then we actually have passive investors or limited partners that come in and they invest. So they don't have to deal with the toilets, the tenants, the operations, any of that stuff. Their job is to vet the deal and to vet the property or vet whatever deal, the team that's doing it. And then they invest, and then they just receive the mailbox money. So that's really the process of working with both, general partners, which are more active, and limited partners, which are more passive, to go after a business deal such as real estate, multifamily real estate.
Bronson, when you and your team are out there scouring real estate prospects, what are you looking for? I mean, is there geographic limitations, structural limitations, retail, multifamily, hospitality?
Yeah, so it is good, I think, in general, for every team to be pretty razor focused on what they do. So we primarily buy properties in the Sun Belt. So it's been mostly actually the Southeast. We have 2,000 apartment units. About 1,500 of these units, excuse me, are in Jacksonville, Florida. And we like Jacksonville for a lot of reasons, because we look for population growth, job growth, income growth, which Jacksonville has all of these. It's also a very landlord-friendly place. Now, like I live in California, there's rent controls and other things. You can't actually raise rents as you want. Well, in Florida, you can. At least in Jacksonville, you can. And so, the average cost of a house, if I'm a retiree moving from the north to Florida, basically around $300,000, I can actually buy a house to be able to live in. So all those people that are moving, there's so many people moving, it's causing just a shortage of housing. So we're seeing rents go from, a year ago, we're $1,200 average rents. Now we're at $1,560. So if you're just buying in the right markets, sometimes that's a huge, huge positive. And there are other factors we look for, but that's one of the primary ones.
And for your limited partners, how do you structure those deals? Are there certain minimums to enter this syndication?
Yeah. So syndication, there are different groups that structure it different ways. We do it where our minimum investment is $75,000. We have investors typically join between $75,000 and $1 million per deal, just depending on their situation. And then they get some tax benefits of hopefully not paying any taxes or deferring taxes on what they are making. And then it's typically a 5-year hold. We usually project to try to double investor equity in 5 years. We've been able to do it sooner in some projects, and then some it's been about as projected. But with inflation, again, owning assets such as these has been very, very favorable.
When you guys are putting together and structuring these syndications, I'm sure it's probably on a deal by deal basis, but how much percentage of the overall profit goes to the general partner and how much goes to the limited partner? And is that flipped upon a refinance?
Yeah, so we do it differently in different deals. We have had some where we have a preferred return, which just means the investors get paid first. So out of all the profits, until investor gets to 8% annually, sometimes we'll just do that first, and then we'll have like a 70-30 split above that. So that just means of the profits above an investor's return of 8% per year, 70% goes to the limited partners or the passive investors, and 30% to the general partners. The deal we're currently working on is actually just an 80-20 straight split with no preferred returns. It basically just says, hey, we're going to, from $1 of after expenses are paid, we're going to split this 80% going to the limited partners, meaning the investors, 20% to the general partners, the management team. And then once an investor gets to 15% on that particular deal, we're switching to a 50-50. So it gives basically a more incentive for us to really perform well on the deal. But we love looking at different structures that really make sense for everybody.
Now, Bronson, your limited partners also like to make money in their sleep. How often do you issue dividends or distributions?
As much as we can, as soon as we can. Some people think, it's just this, we're just holding back distributions and we're just gonna, we really try to say as soon as we can possibly make distributions, we will. We do what's called a value add approach. So this is different than a lot of large syndicators. There's some very well-known people or even real estate investment trusts. And what these guys will do, they have so much money, they have to buy the nicest, newest apartments. And so they're basically counting on the rent. And sometimes, just to help allow what they can pay out. We're buying older product, typically built in the 70s. And so what we do is we're coming in, typically spending millions of dollars, renovating units. We might spend $6,000 to $15,000 per unit to do some upgrades. A current deal we're working on, the average rents currently are $1,000. And the going rate for these Jacksonville apartments is $1,566. So we see a 57% upside, which is a pretty high upside. But what it allows us to do is as soon as we start seeing those rent bumps, as soon as we do those renovations, we start to accumulate cash, we pay out cash. It typically takes around 6 to 12 months for that to start. But we've had it, as soon as 3 months. Sometimes it takes longer than a year. It just really depends on the deal.
Bronson, you're doing some pretty big volume. How do you manage the day-to-day headaches? Leaks, neighbors, guy next door is smoking.
Yeah, it's a good question. The interesting thing is with single family, again, most people that are doing real estate think I'm going to become free financially through real estate, is they think, I've got to do everything myself. When I was I had a property manager and I had, houses in other state, but I was kind of getting these calls and was managing a lot of this stuff myself from a distance, and it got to be a lot. But the amazing thing about large multifamily is that it truly is a team sport. So I have other partners that help me on the operations side. One of my partners has 28 years of experience, has done 13,000 units. And so he just can smell a problem before it happens. He's just really, really great when it comes to problem solving, the asset management. I have another partner that's really in the area. We also have a full-time asset manager. And then these properties we're doing, they're typically 100 to 300 units. And so we actually have a property management team that's on site. Usually that consists of a full-time property manager dedicated to the property. We have 1 or 2 leasing agents that are at the property to lease up new units. We have usually 3 to 5 full-time maintenance people that are there. And then there's other people involved in different ways. But yeah, it's amazing. The larger you get, I think it's counterintuitive. If you were to do a 10-unit property versus a 100-unit property, I think the 100-unit property is actually much easier to manage because you have more resources to hire really good people. And it's just, you get a lot of economies of scale.
That's not the first time I've heard that. I've heard that multiple times over the years. And it's because once you get over a certain number of doors, you could actually afford to have that property manager and the leasing agent right there on site, correct?
That's it. Yeah, there's really a sweet spot. I mean, a lot of people think like I'll do a single family and then a duplex, and I'll go to 4 or 10 units, whatever. Well, when you're below about 60 units, it gets very difficult because it's really hard to find good management. I mean, when you have truly dedicated people, when you have about 60 people, or 60 units typically, or maybe 60, 70 units, you could have an on-site, who's their dedicated full-time property manager, and they do some leasing. And typically you have 1 full-time maintenance person. But below that, you've got people sharing. I mean, it's the same kind of problem you face. If, I've had people that have huge single family portfolios where they've got 40 or 50 or 60 houses. And you think about the mechanics of that, right? There's got to be a maintenance guy that goes to the house at 40, 50 bucks an hour or more, goes over, looks at the problem, then goes back to Home Depot, then finds the part, whatever, and then comes back and fixes it. It could be a half day or full day thing. So you're not only paying for the time, you're paying for the travel. You have all different types of colors of paints and products and things. When you're in one apartment, you typically have a very standard palette of paints. You've got pretty much the same appliances, and there's just so much economies of scale that go into that.
Yeah, it's copy and paste almost at that point, right? I have a couple properties. However, I have a duplex and a couple single families and an Airbnb. And I'm running through those issues that you're talking about right now, right?
Yeah.
That's the guy going to the Home Depot.
Yeah.
I get it. I've been there.
We were actually talking about adding more to our portfolio, but I told my wife if we're going to do it, it has to be in the same place because we already have we have a team down there that can handle it. But I think me and Luigi are actually thinking about more multifamily. So I'm glad you're on our show today.
Not after this podcast. I'm not going to Home Depot.
Yeah.
So Bronson, you're way too smart to be a one-trick pony. Tell us what other inflation busters you have up your sleeve.
Well, I will say, I wrote this ebook called How to Use Inflation to Your Advantage. So if people go to BronsonEquity.com, it's 50 pages. People can download it for free. I give some of these tips. But like I mentioned, there are ways that you can use debt. Now, again, I'll take all the long-term fixed debt I can get. I was able to get, this was about 6 months ago, through a local bank that's in California and Florida. I was able to get what's called a personal line of credit at $100K. That basically they said, we'll give you a rate of 2.75% fixed for 10 years, and it's interest only for the first 2 years. So what that means is basically I get this money for almost for free. I can reinvest it at a higher amount. And I'm not giving anybody any specific advice who's listening. Obviously, you can do your own diligence. This is just what I did. But I know I can get, between 15 and 25% return per year with that money. And I'm only paying 2.75% on it. So, and then, so there's an arbitrage there. But then there's also that because I have this long-term debt, when inflation is high, if you can borrow cheap for the long term, it locks you in. Even if by having the debt and parking it somewhere in an inflation hedged asset. And there are different ones, there's real estate, there's multifamily, there's self-storage. I'm also a fan of physical metals. I buy physical gold and silver. I didn't really get that until I realized, it was actually tied to money. I used to say on a $20 bill that you could exchange a $20 bill up till 1933. You could go into a bank and they give you a 1 ounce gold coin. And so it actually used to be the dollars were a claim check for actual physical metals. So there's some hedge there built in as well. But anything that's real, anything that you buy that's not necessarily a fixed rate that you're investing in, but that it has some sort of hedge there on the inflation side, so that when you go to the store and you see prices are rising, you can actually be a part of that side of the equation rather than just the side of, oh man, stuff just costs more and I'm getting punished.
Yeah, when inflation creeps in, you always want to be inside of hard assets, right? Real estate being one of them, or anything you can actually see, feel, touch, right? At the end of the day, because it's going to go higher. But with that said, you said you were collecting properties down in the Sun Belt, the Southeast. Prices around here have risen dramatically, right? So what are you seeing the cost per door come down to on these apartment buildings? And does your syndication have a sweet spot of what you look for?
So yeah, we look for a number of things. So we're seeing the numbers I gave before about Jacksonville having a pretty high upside, and just rents are just rising. I mean, you're in the right area versus if you buy in like an area like Cleveland, Ohio, which I used to own some single family houses, they just don't have the population growth, right? So not only we're getting inflation, we're also getting population growth. Now, rents and inflation typically go hand in hand. If you look at a chart, there's this chart from Mother Jones that is a magazine that shows that it's pretty much in lockstep. Rents lag inflation just a little bit, but they generally keep pretty much a straight line. So, but buying in an area like Jacksonville, we're paying about between 155 and 165,000 per door for stuff that's built in the 1970s, versus in Phoenix, you might get similar upside in the numbers, but you're still paying around 300,000 per unit. So we're paying, half or a little more than half of what they're paying elsewhere. It's still actually below replacement costs to build. Now it would cost you probably around 200,000 or more per unit to build. So again, there's another of Warren Buffett's term where he calls the idea of a margin of safety, right? That if things don't go perfectly here, we're still going to do just fine. So even as rates rise, even if valuations come down a little bit as far as how much per unit, we're still going to see rents are going to keep rising because of inflation and because of population growth.
So you weren't always in real estate. Tell us about the past life.
Yeah, so I've lived a number of past lives. When I was in college or out of college, I was actually a youth pastor. So I worked with students. I really loved making a difference in the lives of others. And, I did that for about 4 or 5 years. And then I got into medical device sales, did that. I enjoyed that. I loved working with people, but I had this kind of gnawing feeling of like, I just had so many ideas and so much creativity that I didn't want to be limited and stuck to a job to do the time for money trade. And so one thing we do as well now is I actually teach professionals how to leave their job. Like I had a job, I was making, over 200,000 a year. My family and my friends, every single person thought I was crazy, except for my entrepreneurs group that I paid to be a part of. And they're like, without exception, they were like, you should leave your job pretty much as soon as possible. And that was actually a year ago. I was able to have almost 150 million in real estate, but it's the golden handcuffs, right? It's hard to leave a job that's a job it just pays you too much. I was working 20, 30 hours a week. But now what it's allowed me to do is I can travel. I've traveled 5 times internationally this year. I've created some new resources. I'm a part of some amazing masterminds and groups. I'm a total biohacker and fitness guy. So it gives me the ability to spend time with my daughter, just do things that I'm really passionate about. So I think when you look at the stats, something like 65% of people don't like their jobs. And I think a lot of it just comes from being stuck to the golden handcuffs. You can't leave. So I'm really passionate about trying to help people to show them there's another way.
Bronson, I agree with almost everything that comes out of your mouth, but I do have one question for you where me and you don't see eye and eye. What are you still doing in California?
Yeah, sometimes I look in the mirror. I'm like, why am I in California? All of our stuff is outside of California. I don't own anything in California. A lot of my friends, people have left politically. I feel like I match, much like Texas and Florida and other areas. My situation, my daughter, I have a 9-year-old daughter, and her mom has her half the time. I have her half the time. So I'm here until she grows up or her mom wants to move. But I've suggested, hey, if you want to move pretty much anywhere, I'd be open to entertain that conversation. But, I will say about California, I pay almost zero taxes here legally. And so I get to enjoy great weather all the time. I get to, there's a lot of skiing and snowboarding around, hiking, all kinds of outdoorsy
Bronson,
stuff.
Don't take it personally. Matt has a personal referral fee set up with DeSantis, and every transplant he can get, I think he gets.
I love it. I think you're going to say you had a personal referral up to Newsom to have me get audited or something like that. So I'm not quite sure about that.
So Bronson, I'm glad you brought up taxes, right? Because there's a lot of tax benefits in real estate, right? And I know you have, I don't think you're a CPA, right? Me and Luigi aren't CPAs, nor do we ever want to be at the end of the day. But can you give us some of your experience with taxes and real estate and some strategies that people can use?
So yeah, I think a lot of times we come up to something where I have a lot of medical professionals I worked with, and they were paying 50% or more in taxes a year. In California, the highest tax rate if you're making over $1 million is over 13% just for the state. Plus, you got the federal, so you have a total rate of I think it's around 53 to 56% per year, which is crazy, right? People are paying more than half their money to the government. But really, when it comes to reducing or eliminating taxes, and there are ways to actually do both. And again, I'm not giving anybody any specific advice because I'm not a CPA. But what I did is you have kind of these two buckets, right? One is you have your passive income or your investing or your real estate bucket. Over here with multifamily investing, we're able to provide a lot of depreciation. So what this does is this says that 100K invested, we have a current deal that it's going to offer 90K in year one passive losses. Even though it's not going to produce any income, it's going to have these passive losses. So if somebody sells a property or has some other gain over an investment side, they can basically on this side, they can basically take that as a deduction. Obviously consult your CPA, make sure you can, but it allows you to reduce your investment income. So it offsets that. Now there's something really magical that's out there called the real estate professional. Now, if somebody can Google that term, it's the IRS term, real estate professional. But what it allows you to take these passive losses over here and it will apply them to ordinary income. So if you or your spouse are a real estate professional, that means you have the potential to take these depreciated losses and apply them against your ordinary income. And I've seen people do this. I actually did it the last few years of working my job where I was able to basically reduce my effective income to zero. And so I saved about 150,000 in taxes I would have paid. Now, another option is if somebody is a physician, they're making $500,000 a year. Maybe their spouse is a real estate agent. There's some minimums. You have to do 750 hours a year. It's got to be 51% of your time, but you get a lot of depreciation through doing some deals. You can actually use the depreciation against your ordinary income. So there's some really magical things that can work on both sides of that equation, both the passive side as well as if you actually are more active in real estate. But it's awesome.
So when you guys are acquiring these properties, are you going and doing a cost seg analysis against it?
Yeah.
Right.
So
Taking the
that's how we do it.
depreciation all up front. Can you explain that for the audience a little bit on exactly what that is?
Yeah, so it's a little bit complex. I'm just going to kind of simplify it a little bit. But what it basically allows you to do, we hire a firm where they break the property down into 4 parts, which it means what is the land, what is the land improvements, which is the building, and which is the equipment. Now, each of those separate parts of a property have different depreciation schedules, except for the land. You can't depreciate the land, but you can depreciate the other stuff. Normally, this is over a 10 to 27 and a half year period. What it allows us to do with this study is we can bring forward some of those. I believe it's the building, the equipment. You can bring all of that depreciation forward to year one and use it all now. Now, the challenge is when you sell in 5 years, you have a recapture event, which just means they kind of prorate it and they figure out what you didn't use, and you could have some taxable stuff that's you have to pay in 5 years. But if you think about how this works, assuming the laws, carry on and, there's some things that are kind of up in the air, but let's say you do this now, you defer all these taxes for at least 5 years. Well, the 100K that, you haven't paid any taxes on, but you've grown, maybe you've gotten 50K of income through cash flow, 50K at the sale. Now you've got another 100K. So you've got 200K. You reinvest that in 2 more deals and you get more depreciation from that. So it kind of offsets some of that taxable gain that you will have in 5 years. So the goal is basically it becomes like a 1031 tax exempt exchange where you're just simply deferring taxes further and further down the road.
That is one of the most magical things in real estate, especially this year when you get the bonus depreciation before it ends.
Yeah, absolutely. Real estate is one of those things I've said for a long time. I feel like it's an unfair asset class, and really, these are not loopholes. They're really incentives the government provides because they need to provide affordable housing, right? So what they do is they don't pay you to do it. They give you incentives through tax reasons to be able to do it. But I think that the ability to defer taxes, the ability to reduce or eliminate taxes. I realized instead of making 200K a year, I could make 140 a year. And I was making the same money, right? Because I wasn't paying taxes on it. And it is really magical to find that out.
Have you guys done anything with any opportunity zones or looked into them?
I've looked into it. Opportunity zones are very interesting. Basically, opportunity zones, from what I understand, basically, if you buy in an opportunity zone and you hold, let's say you have some gains that you have sold a property and you use those proceeds, and there's a process, you buy in a certain area that is an opportunity zone. If you hold it for 10 years, then you don't pay any sort of taxes on those gains ever. If you hold it for 7 or 8 years or something, there's some benefit, but it's not as much. It's really like a 10-year hold, which is funny because syndicated deals, we find 5 to 6 years is usually kind of the max that we go for. So when you say, hey, I'm going to, talk to an investor and, hey, we're going to have your money for over 10 years, they just think like, gosh, how old am I going to be in 10 years? I'm going to be old. There's just so much time goes by. But I think for some groups, it can work really well, especially if you're a buy and hold forever type of investor.
Yeah, I have to read more into that. But from what I do know, I don't think it's just real estate. I think it could be if you have a capital gain in any asset class and you roll it, opportunity zone is only real estate, but you roll it into an opportunity zone, you can bypass all those capital gains.
Yeah, there's all kinds of creative stuff on the tax side. There's a guy that I know, actually a couple guys that sold a dental practice in California, and it was almost a $5 million gain. And they found a way to basically be able to reduce the taxes pretty low. It was going to be like maybe I think it was going to be like a 10% tax, but then they found a way through California where if you make a donation to like a land trust or a conservation thing, there was like a 4.5 times multiple. So they basically would I think they were going to have to pay like $450K taxes, but if they made $100K or $125K donation, or it's almost like a syndication for this conservation, they don't pay almost zero taxes. So off of like almost $5 million gain, they end up paying $125,000 for this thing, and they have no additional taxes, which is amazing. So there's all these things out there. There's tax strategy firms. I'm not a CPA or a strategy firm, but there are groups out there that do that, and it's really amazing.
Bronson, we really appreciate you being here. We want to be respectful of your time. Can you tell everybody where they can find you on socials? And I know you already gave the website once for your ebook, but let's drop that again too.
Yeah, so I love talking with people. We have a few things we do. We've got this book, How to Use Inflation to Your Advantage, and it's at BronsonEquity.com. We also are doing deals, so if people are interested in joining our deal list, they can look at investing alongside of us. And we're really passionate about trying to help people for the long term and really take care of our investors. But this has been a lot of fun, guys. I really appreciate you having me on today.
Bronson, thank you for being here, man. I appreciate it. But before I let you run, I got one question for you. If you could only invest in one state, what state would it be?
Well, I know what state it wouldn't be, right? It wouldn't be California. It would be Florida for sure. Yeah.
Told you, Lou. We got to get you down here soon.
And the commission checks just keep on coming.
Yeah, DeSantis, man, he keeps passing out checks to you. You're on the affiliate program, right? Is that right?
Guys, that's a wrap of the Liquid Lunch Project. We'll catch you on the next episode.
Thank you for listening to the show. And make sure you subscribe, leave a review, and share it with a friend. We'll see you on the next episode of the Liquid Lunch Project.